Okay. Hello. Hi, Cami. How are you doing?
Hey Pat, I'm doing okay. How are you? I hear it's beautiful up in Minnesota today.
It is. It's gorgeous. And my husband and I just got back from the Twin Cities up to our river property. So as I told you right before we started, I just can't wait to, the sun is out, the leaves are turning beautiful color. The smell of autumn is just such an interesting smell. And then when we got up here, like six swans, it's two swans and some babies that are not so little anymore. We're out on the river and it's like, oh, this is just what I've needed in my life right now. And with everything that's been going on in the world and in the United States and just even in our own lives, it just feels like time to. Yeah, I got the Northern Lights last night. Did you guys see them
Yay.
down there in Kentucky?
Yeah, a little bit. Yep, they came through a little bit.
It was amazing because all of a sudden I saw people were posting like Northern Lights kind of thing. And I'm like, oh, and I walked outside of the deck of my son and daughter-in-law's home, and you could actually see the red with a naked eye, that's pretty intense that you actually see it with the naked eye. And then when you put your phone up there, it just captures, and it was just so beautiful. So we're seeing so many like different things going on, so that was just a nice way to end a day and just release some things, and just like there is such beauty, even amidst chaos in our lives.
Yeah. Yeah, I think those moments to stop and take it all in are so important, especially when, yeah, the chaos and the energy of the world is just so intense. And I know you had an intense weekend doing your celebrant work with the family. So I would love to hear more about how that went for you.
Oh, absolutely. So 2 weeks ago I was up here at our home, and I'm up here like part-time, right? And I had just gotten to my home here on the river, and I got a call from the funeral home that I do some celebrant work for, and they're like, can you possibly do a celebration of life the following Sunday, which would have been last Sunday? And I'm like, sure, it's unusual to do it on a Sunday, but yeah, sure. And she goes, well, the people up here are located, and it was only 20 miles away. So it was very unusual. So I was able to meet with this, the wife. Her husband had died young, he's in his early 50s, a traumatic death. So it was a big intensity to like step into this celebrant work. So I did go and meet with this woman, and we talk about at the Confident Grief Coach program about creating your tribe. And it was amazing because when I walked, who had actually reached out and who I'd been connecting to is her sister. And then I go to her home to meet with her, and she is surrounded by two of her sisters. There's five girls in her family and her mother. So two sisters and her mother. And I thought, wow. And this woman it was very, very difficult for her to even make a decision or talk about some of the things. And I just knew that I just needed to like have that space of holding her and maneuvering through some of the, sensitive topics and that type of thing. But her family, she leaned into her sisters to help do some of the planning. And I thought that's her tribe. Oftentimes we'll say don't have family members, but it depends upon the relationship that they had with the loved one who died. And these sisters, they've also had to do it one other time when one of their sisters, her husband died at the age of in his 30s. So they knew how to like commune together and be like this special familial tribe to support one another. It
Oh,
was
that's
amazing.
powerful. That reminds me of that visual. I think Megan Devine mentions that in It's Okay, You're Not Okay. She talks about how elephants, when someone's wounded, how the tribe or pack will surround them and just place them in the center and just hold them and just protect them. And I got that visual as you're describing this woman and her the female, her sisters and her mom, and just this beautiful feminine just container for healing that they're
Yeah.
surrounding with.
Yeah, it was so impactful. And so part of, this was a traumatic death. And the family isn't ready to discuss all the circumstances and even like discussing the death. It's just so hard. The wife, it's so hard to speak to it. So I had to ask her, how would you like me to approach this in the service? And she gave me, it was very hard for her. So what I chose to do and what I told her that I would do is oftentimes, and this is for anybody who's listening, where all of a sudden your friend or a family member experiences a deep loss, a tragic death, unexpected death, is be careful how you respond, because one of our automatic responses is, oh my gosh, how did he or she die? What happened? And I remember, and I've talked about this before, when my brother died, it'll be 3 years in November. My family, his wife and children, they weren't out there wanting to, and my brother was a very private person. So, but that's what I noticed was everybody asked, oh my gosh, how did he die? What happened? How did he die? Oh my gosh, I can't believe that this happened. How did he die? And we didn't have answers. I didn't have answers for them, nor did I feel it was my place to give any answers. And so I realized how intense that is when you're peppered with those questions all the time. So how I approached it at the funeral celebration of life was, because you want to let people, you don't want it to be the elephant in the room, speaking of elephants, right? And having people kind of make up stories or that type of thing. But I wanted to reframe for the people that were there. And so my reframing for them was, I know people will ask, how did he die? What happened? But I believe the real question is, how did he live? And that's what the whole ceremony was about, was the beautiful interactions that he had, how he held the space, the wonderful father that he was to his children. He had, one's still a teenager, one's a 20-year-old in college, so fairly young adults and emerging adults. And it just ended up to be so beautiful, because really it framed everything into this beautiful memory and experiences for the family, and where they didn't have to feel like they had to ask the question. But it also, I think it helped the people who were there to think twice before asking that question. And so for people that are listening here to this episode, I know that I've asked that question a bazillion times myself. And now I try to catch myself, like, don't ask what happened. Oh my gosh. And that's kind of a natural, but to kind of step back maybe a little bit, because a family member they'll tell you if they want you to know. But if they're not fully sharing, there's a reason for that. So honor that.
I love that. I love that you helped to reframe the intention of the ceremony, which was celebration of life. And I think, I think there's a part of grief processing that comes with a funeral, because of course we're trying to wrap our head around this new reality that this person's gone. And in doing so, we can forget about the entire lifetime that we did have in connection with them. Or maybe it is painfully obvious that we have that deep connection and they're no longer here. So I think that's a beautiful way to balance how you were able to incorporate both ends of those sides of the spectrum in the ceremony without focusing too much on the trauma that was, I mean, just piercing through the hearts of this family.
Yeah. And as I mentioned, so it was a mom and dad and two young boys, emerging adults. And I had reached out to the boys via text to just like, can you share some stories with your dad? And I thought this was pretty appropriate. I'm going to share just what one of the younger ones said to me, because he said, sorry if I can't list as many things as usual, or I can't say a specific story. My memory is a little foggy for some reason. So I said, I reached back out to him and thanked him for sharing his special thoughts that he did share. But I said, there's a real reason behind your brain feeling foggy. It has to do with the science of grief and its effect on the brain. So know that what you are feeling is super normal. And he wrote, "Thank you." So he was struggling into, my brain isn't working like it normally works. And so as I was sitting there and kind of conversing and stuff, I saw this book on my shelf, and it's called Grief Recovery for Teens. And it was written by 𝗁𝗵𝗶𝗄, who actually was the director of the camp that, the grief camp that I've been volunteering at for, a long time, probably a decade now. But she wrote this because she is a master's in social work, a counselor, and really is about the children and the teens and that type of thing. So she wrote this beautiful book. And so I haven't read the whole book. I just ordered it one day. And so I haven't gone through it. But I was just kind of like going through it a little bit this morning and last night. And it's so cool because off what she has in here, so many of the tools for the teens is a lot of what we teach in the Confident Grief Coach program. So when I say the breathe coaching model for grief can be used in groups, it can be used in different age groups, that type of thing. You just adapt it. You just adapt it to fit the, who's your client. And so this is a great book. It's very easy read. I actually think that for this family, I may just send little snippets to them just as a kind of little aftercare to the boys, to just let them know that, what you're feeling is okay. And some of these things may be helpful for you, type thing.
Yeah.
But she actually, I just had landed on something like, a list of all these cool, I think she has 50 things that you can do. I can't remember what it was, but like 50 things that you can just create this list. And I thought about our faith toolbox, right? Just, in our faith toolbox that we have in our program, the breathe coaching model is listing out all these things that are feel good activities, so that when you're in the depths of that despair and it's just like clutching and choking you, that you can think, oh, maybe I can go outside and just take a couple of deep breaths. Maybe I can, go outside and look. I'm looking at the beautiful colors in the trees right now, and just allow myself to breathe, just to calm down the nervous system. So, so I just wanted to share that. I mean, there are so many resources out there, and if you're someone that you don't even have to be a professional, if you're just listening to this and you're not a professional grief support, there are things that you can do to support your loved ones. One, don't ask how they died if no one has shared it with you. That's number one. Number two, if there are children or teenagers or whatever in the family, maybe you take them, out, and maybe they go for a walk, or help mom and dad, if they're really challenged being a single parent now, or whatever the case may be. You can maybe, ask if you could take the kids and take them out for pizza or something like that, just to give everybody like a little bit of a break. There are books like this, which would be like, what a super gift to give a family, Grief Recovery for Teens, because it's written for the teen.
Yeah.
So yeah, it ended up to be I believe a beautiful, powerful ceremony. And my intention is always, as a celebrant, is to make these ceremonies, these celebration of lives, these funerals, whatever anybody wants to call them, to be the best first step on a grief journey that we can do, knowing that there's nothing best about grief and grieving, especially early on.
Thanks for sharing that, Pat. I'm curious if anything stuck out as far as supporting teens specifically, and maybe with your experience with these young boys in this family and flipping through this book. Was there anything that stood out that is unique for what teens are going through that you'd like to speak on?
For this one, I think I treated them like they were young adults. And I asked them for their input. I encouraged the family who was helping to put this together to have the boys involved in some way. So some of it was giving me some information. The one son who is a piano player actually played a piece, Chopin's Funeral March. And so that was so powerful to have the 20-year-old come up and actually do that in honor of his dad. Yeah, so I think, you know, for me, it's not babying it down or, you know, like you have to depend on the amount of, I don't know how to say this, empathy, the kind of empathy you share with a teen, because, and you can probably speak to this more than I can, right? I just know my grief. I was a rebellious teen when I suffered a lot of losses. I didn't want anybody like babying me or treating me like I was a child, because I wasn't. So I wanted to be held with respect, right? And I think that, you know, for me to be able to go to each one of these individual and treat them with respect, and that I saw them and I heard them, was what was probably the most powerful.
Yeah, I could echo that just on my experiences being 11 and 15 with my losses, how when people were trying to hide or protect me from information, that made things especially confusing for me. And especially being 15, it's like I know very well what happened. I mean, like I was there when my stepdad died. So to think that I can't handle it, you know, was almost like a diss or a burn to me, because it was like, well, look what I just experienced. And now I'm needing support with this. So to try to brush it under the rug and protect me is not actually protecting me from being able to move through what I had just gone through. So I love that you mentioned just making them feel seen and heard, like not dismissing them or putting them aside just because they're minors, but really including them in this process is absolutely a great step to supporting them in their grief process as well.
Well, it was kind of cool too, because I write up the whole ceremony and I sent it to the funeral home, and they had asked for a copy of it. Normally I don't send it to the family because it's just your notes, like, okay, say this, you know, this is where the songs come in, da-da. But they had given it to the boys, and the boys said, there's a couple of things that aren't exactly accurate. And I'm like, oh, thank goodness. Thank goodness you told me. Here, let me get my pen. And I think that validated for them too, that they had a say in how this went.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah.
Wow.
So
Well,
it's pretty powerful.
yeah, yeah, they were definitely lucky to have an amazing celebrant to guide this and to just involve them in the process. I know I've heard some horror stories of how the funeral and the celebration can go just terribly wrong, and not that there's, you know, a right or a wrong way to do it, but I think especially like you said, making this the best first step on in someone's grieving process, it's a really sensitive, tender time to address and set the stage for the whole rest of this person's life now with the other person. So it's cool to hear you speak about from your point of view how you're able to facilitate that.
Well, and I think my coaching and my celebrant work is just like, it's so cohesive together. So my experience and my knowledge of coaching and grief coaching helps me to be a better celebrant. And being a celebrant and being very cognizant of how I do this helps me to be a better grief coach. And I didn't become a celebrant. I was a grief coach long before I was a celebrant. And then, you know, I was encouraged, well, go to the celebrant training. You know, I think you'd be really good at it. And I did. And I'm so glad that I did, because it really is something that I think most grief coaches probably would really like, you know, as part of their life and what they're sharing, you know, with families. I just think it's, yeah, there's a really good program out there, and it's called Insights Celebrant Training in the US, and I can't give it enough kudos, and it's been a few years now since I've been a part of that, but I've encouraged other people to go and check them out because I just think it's a way to connect with people in a different way. And at that early stage where you're not really going to do coaching, but you're using some of your coaching skills to help them as they start this journey. And then as it goes along, then you're available and they'll remember you and there's a relationship already built. So if they are ready for coaching down the road, you're there for them.
I love that. I can see how those skills overlap and how there's, I mean, even in the Confident Grief Coach program, we have those areas of ceremony and honoring practices that come through that is a very important part of, you know, the coaching process and helping someone take those steps forward. So awesome. Well, thanks for sharing about your experience this weekend. Is there anything else that you want to end on? Any words of wisdom or comments about anything?
I don't think so. I'm just going to give a plug. 𝗀𝐴MMY has been just like instrumental. We're really getting our Confident Grief Coach app up and running. So we'll let you know as soon as that is ready to deploy the free app. And there'll be some cool resources for people who, you know, are in the grief coaching, grief counseling, clergy, whoever's like in that professional grief support space. That's our intentionality, is to create a community out of that. So that's happening. And very soon we're going to have a bundle for sale that are, I think there's 5 pieces to this bundle that we're going to be sharing out there. So if people want to have some really meaty pieces to be working within, you know, their coaching, or if they're dabbling in, you know, being a grief support wherever they're at, we're actually giving some of the cool things that we have as part of the Confident Grief Coach program in a little bundle, a starter set. So keep an eye out for that. We've been working hard, and 𝗀𝐴MMY, you've just been so awesome and helping me with that. I wouldn't be anywhere without you right now in all those
Thanks, Kat.
aspects. So thank
Well,
you.
I'm excited. We've got lots to share with the world, and it's the hard part is like taking all of this and
Yep.
like bringing it, you know, into the world. So yeah, happy to help and happy to share this with people. We have so many resources to offer you all. So yeah, keep an eye out for the app and for the bundle, and of course, reach out to us if you have any questions about the Confident Grief Coach program, or if you're seeking coaching yourself. We're always happy to talk.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, thank you, 𝗀𝐴MMY. I hope you have a most beautiful weekend.
Yeah, you too, Pat. Thanks.
All righty. Bye-bye.
Bye.